Whether great or small, monuments dot the landscape of Texas and recall a history over hundreds of years. These monuments can be buildings, places, statuary, anything that has a story to be told. These stories are most often told from a perspective of power. Those that have been marginalized rarely have their narrative told in the public sphere. That is why it is our job as students of history to apply a test of credibility to the monuments that surround us, and, if possible, to give voice to the silences that have been created. There are so many monuments to choose from in Texas that I narrowed it down by finding a place that has particular significance to my family and I. On a cold winter night on January 4th of 2017, a young man led a beautiful woman to a small, quiet gazebo within walking distance of the Texas state capitol. There, he asked her to marry him in the very location that his own parents had been married in March 1979. They had been taking a walk through history together, and from the foundation of his parents' marriage, he pledged to build a life with her. That young man was me, and the gazebo is in Wooldridge Square Park. You might say that we, my family, have monumentalized this location without any understanding of how this unassuming park came to be and without understanding of its historical significance to the city. Wooldridge Square Park is located in a very prominent location in Austin. It has an unobstructed view of the state capitol building, and it is located directly across the street from the Herman Sweat Courthouse and the original Austin Public Library. The land for the park was designated as a public square in the original 1839 plan for the city of Austin. And of the 4 parks initially included in the city's master plan, Wooldridge Square Park is the only one that has remained a park throughout its existence. According to the historical marker at the site, the land went unused and vacant for 70 years. During an era of civic pride and beautification, efforts led to the resurrection of the park and the construction of the gazebo in 1909. The park was dedicated by then Mayor A.P. Wooldridge, for whom the park is named. So, who is A.P. Wooldridge? The commemorative placard states that Mayor Wooldridge served the city by organizing its first public school system, coordinating the arrival of the Austin Northwest Railroad, and building the first Colorado River Dam through Austin. What it doesn't mention is that Mayor Wooldridge is known as the father of the public school system in Austin. Not only was he president of the school board for the first public school system, but he was also the chairman of the committee that championed building the University of Texas in Austin. He was heralded as a progressive visionary known for major public works efforts during the city beautification movement that swept across the United States in the early 1900s. His efforts include paving and lighting the streets east to west between Red River and Guadalupe, and north to south between 24th and 1st Streets. He also improved sanitation and expanded both the police and fire departments. The park itself has an entire history post-dedication independent of its namesake. As he did his tour across the southern states, and after being denied an opportunity to speak at the Capitol building, Booker T. Washington was invited to speak at the park in 1911. Between 1910 and 1960, nearly every major political campaign had its kickoff speech at Wooldridge Square Park, including LBJ during his 1948 run for the Senate. In 1945, the Big Peace Rally was held there near the end of World War II, and in 1964, the Freedom Now rally was held to protest segregation. However, what I decided to focus on is the history that is quickly brushed over when referenced in the commemoration. The statement that the park lay vacant for 70 years. Was the place truly a vacant space? My argument is that prior to 1909, the park was far from vacant, far from the informal dump as labeled in the current public narrative. Instead, it had been the religious and cultural center for African Americans in Austin, and I believe the post-Reformation African American history of this place was purposely silenced by those in power as a part of sweeping changes that eventually led to the divides that we still see in Austin to this day. In 1867, 42 years prior to the dedication of Wooldridge Square Park, Reverend Jacob Fontaine started the First Baptist Church in Austin. This is the oldest Black Baptist church in Austin and is still around to this day, although the current building is in its 4th location. The church started with only 13 members and would grow to what its own historical marker refers to as a significant force in the development of Austin's Black community. In 1869, Mayor Leander Brown deeded the church a tract of land on the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. This was the site for the construction of the church's first sanctuary, and this site is on the southeast corner of what is now Wooldridge Square Park. Jacob Fontaine's contribution to the Black communities of Austin cannot be overstated. Within 10 years of starting the First Baptist Church, he established the Austin Gold Dollar, which was one of the first Black newspapers in the South and the first newspaper under Black ownership in Austin. Reverend Fontaine also operated a grocery, laundry, book, and medicine store, helped found St. John's Regular Missionary Baptist Association, and from 1873 to 1887, he founded an additional 5 churches around Austin, including Sweet Home in Clarksville and New Hope in Wheatville. Emancipation did not eliminate poverty and dislocation, chaos, or uncertainty, and because of this, churches became central to the Reconstruction. Black churches helped newly freed persons find the skills and develop the talents that would allow them to lead independent lives. At church, formerly enslaved people could learn to read and they could learn mathematics. These rights and opportunities were previously denied to the entire population of enslaved people. Churches became the pillars of the community and often led to the development of Black institutions of secondary and higher education. One example would be Austin's Metropolitan AME. When Austin Public Schools opened in 1881, there were 2 primary schools for African American children, Wheatville and the Metropolitan AME Church. In 1873, Reverend Frank Green established his church on the east side of San Antonio Street, Lot 1 and Block 101, what is now the southwest corner of Wooldridge Square Park. Metropolitan AME has been an established congregation in Austin for over 100 years, though like Fontaine's First Baptist, it has had to change locations many times. Nearly everything published post-1909 about Wooldridge Square Park refers to the park as an informal dump during its first 70 years. I believe this was simply the white person's perspective, and this narrative is not at all true. Yes, the park may have been unfunded. There was no structure, and it had poor drainage, but it was not a dump. Instead, it was at the center of many of the first for Austin's Black communities. This was a place at the center of our community's history. Churches that are still congregating today, schools, and many Black businesses and business owners all got their start at this little square park. The dedication at Wooldridge Square Park is focused on one man, a white man. We don't necessarily have to discount his dedication to Austin and the work he did for the city. However, we do need to recount the Black history at this site. The significance of the park within the Black community is what's missing from the monumentalizing of this public place. It was not simply a space vacant of history for 70 years. The park has its own deep-rooted history, and this history helps contextualize many of the events that took place at a later time. Did Reverend Jacob Fontaine's son watch Booker T. Washington's speech in 1911, only yards from where his father's church once stood? The Freedom Now rally, protesting segregation, was in the same spot that freedmen took it upon themselves to build a community for the first time 100 years before. My research on this has yielded many questions that I would like to address if I'm able to continue with my research. Why did the lighting and paving of the city under Mayor Wooldridge essentially end at Wooldridge Square Park? Why in 1913, when leases were up and 3 churches were relocated, was a public library erected, one that Black Austinites did not have access to? Why was the north side of the park then chosen as the site for the new courthouse? Mayor Wooldridge may have laid the literal foundation in Austin, but the movement of Black communities, the new structures that were built, and the re-narrativization of a park that was once at the center of a Black community all seemed like a purposeful move that would eventually lead to the mass movement of Black communities east of what is now I-35 in 1928. Did Wooldridge and those in power also lay the foundation for the racial and socioeconomic divide that we see in Austin today? Wooldridge Square Park is a place that has lost a piece of its history. By silencing the place that existed prior to 1909, turning it into simply a vacant space, we allowed the place, a rich history, to be erased. Through that, the community was changed. The public narrative surrounding that community was changed. A new community and a new narrative were allowed to form, one that we still see in Austin today. To Dr. Gordon, Dr. Whithales, Sophia, and Lauren, I want to say thank you very much. This class has been inspiring, and I really, in particular, appreciate all the help that Sophia and Lauren gave me throughout this process. This has been eye-opening, and I feel like I've really learned a lot about a monument that meant so much to my family for so long. So thank you. See, every major political campaign started. See, every major political campaign started. Within 10 years of starting the first black business, these rights and opportunities were previously denied. Were previously denied to the entire, let's start that again. One such example, center of many of the first, I love also that the water glass is empty. The park has its own deep-rooted history, and this history helps contextualizing of this public place. Start one more time. Wooldridge.